These things definitely are not built for talking over there.
They really aren't. It's like, screen. Yes. Start here. Are we starting with the slides or are we starting with the video?
We can start with the video,
Okay.
the first video,
Which of these is it?
the first one, like in their sequential order.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Let's plug that. It's going to do that thing where it makes us drag across every time, which is going to be a pain. We can, yeah, we can do the lights. So the lights are through the room controls thing. So if you come over here, unfortunately, when they say half on, it's pretty dark. So what I've noticed is when the lights are like this, they won't talk. So whenever I want them to talk to me or to look at slides, I turn the lights back on and then they somehow mysteriously regain energy.
Mystery of the light.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is good to see you all. Where should you be on Friday? Why should you be in quiz section on Friday? Yes, there's a quiz. How do you know what to study for the quiz? Yeah, look at the review sheets. That is correct. Look at the review sheet. It's updated through Monday. Tonight, I'm going to update it through today. So as with last time, it's going to be light on what we covered today, but a little bit of what we covered today will be in there. So please make sure that you check that review sheet. Any questions about the quiz or about housekeeping things before we hear about the modern Port of Africa? Okay, great. Go for it.
Hi, good afternoon. It's me again. Last time we were talking about ancient and medieval Horn of Africa and kind of touched how the same geopolitical factors are still at play when it comes to understanding the Horn of Africa. The world, as it changes, it stays pretty much the same. Today, we will begin with the recent geopolitical shift. The focus will be just modern Horn of Africa. And when I talk about the modern Horn of Africa, you might sense that I focus so much on what we call today southern Eritrea and central highland Ethiopia, all the way to northern Kenya. Okay, that is the region that I will be focusing on. And you will ask, like, why? And most of this region part falls in the boundaries of this country called Ethiopia. And you might ask, like, why? It's not because I come from that region. It's because that is the geopolitical base for the entire region. Whatever happens in that economic base affects anything that happens in the region. Okay, the mountainous region of Ethiopia and southern Eritrea. That's where this talk comes and goes back to. Okay, this is a celebration that happened very, very recently. You
Want the sound?
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can figure out how to make sound happen.
Guess where this is at? Fireworks, yes. Where is this? Of course, in Ethiopia. What is happening? What are you seeing on the screen? Any thoughts? Yes.
Sort of celebration. New or exciting.
Yes. Something new, something very exciting, and something that was never done before as far as we are concerned about history. It never happened. But this is a huge shift in the region. This is the inaugural ceremony of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Anybody has heard about this dam? Okay. Very recently, the President of the United States, President Trump said, actually, the United States funded not this vacuum cleaner, but the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. He said that. And many Ethiopians were infuriated over this. You know what? Because they built this thing with their own money for the most part. And we'll talk about that. Yes. All these people are the dignitaries and like the ruling class, the ruling party's higher officials participating in this celebration. And in the morning ceremony, this is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and the fireworks are coming from it. And this Grand Renaissance Dam in the morning will have all the major political leaders of Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia for its official inaugural ceremony. Okay, so this is huge. Why is it so big? I mean, it's Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So what is the big deal about it? Okay, this dam is not just a dam. It is a hydroelectric power dam, yes, but it is built on the River Nile, the Blue Nile. Okay, what comes to your mind when I say Nile or the River Nile? Yes, please.
Egypt.
Exactly. Egypt. Everybody thinks Egypt. When the River Nile is mentioned, Egyptian civilization, all the pyramids, all the pharaohs, and all their history comes to people's mind. But how many of you know that actually the Nile doesn't start in Egypt? Okay, good. Good. The Nile does not come from Egypt. Egypt is just a passageway to the Nile as it goes to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile rather comes from the countries south of Egypt, Uganda, Kenya, and most importantly, Ethiopia. Ethiopia contributes, according to the current statistics, 86% of the Nile. 86%. It has two major tributaries to the Nile. One is the Atbara tributary. The other is the Blue Nile or the Abai tributary. That's what Ethiopians call the River Nile. So the Ethiopians, even though this river comes from them, even though it starts its journey from them, they never had anything significant built upon it. And Ethiopia today is a country of somewhere around 135 million people. And the birth rate is about 4 million people every year. So it is like having one more little country every year, okay? So it's a big country. And they had the determination some 14 years ago to start a grand electric project on this river. And this infuriated a lot of people. Why? Okay, now I want to go back to my slide. Come on, slide. slide. So,
It's okay.
Make this small. Come here. Drag this one across.
okay.
Okay.
So, yes, thank you. Okay. So this dam, this is what it looks like today. Of course, it's hydroelectric power dam, so the water after hitting the turbines, it goes out. It took 14 years to build. Somewhere around 15,000 people have died to construct this dam. It is constructed in the southwestern part of Ethiopia, 15 kilometers from the border with Sudan. 3 prime ministers have come and gone, and the current one is the third one during its construction. And 4 to 5 billion USD have been spent on this dam. And as far as any records go, no Western development loan or aid or funding was gained from any Western organization or country. Currently, the lake, the artificial lake that was created because of this dam over the Blue Nile is 74 trillion liters of water. So 74 billion cubic meters of water is just sitting there. This is huge. This is a huge resource. If you can sell 1 liter of 1 meter cube water for $1, that means $74 billion is sitting there. How much do we pay for our bottled waters? Yeah. So why do Ethiopians invest on this thing? Why? Why was this dam so important? Even though the construction started 14 years ago, the plan actually came much earlier than that. The plan began 60 years back. However, at that time, the Ethiopian emperor, probably whom you know as Emperor Haile Selassie the first, he neither had the money nor the geopolitical leverage to realize this dam. Why? Because the country did not have enough engineers, definitely. Because the country did not have enough wealth or enough money to sponsor this dam. The Ethiopians also had another very important competitor in the region. As you said earlier, whenever you hear the word Nile, what comes to your mind is Egypt. Nobody even remembers that it is actually in Ethiopia and Uganda and Kenya that this river starts from. Particularly, Ethiopia was completely forgotten, considering her 86% of contribution to the river. The Egyptians, because their survival as a state, as a nation, depends on it, they will try to do anything to make sure that this river keeps flowing to them. Because without Nile, without the water, Egypt is literally desert, as you know. If you look at the Egyptian map, where do Egyptians live? Right next to the banks of the river Nile. That's where the entire Egyptian population lives. Okay? So they tried their best to make sure that there is no obstacle in this flow of resources. The river Nile didn't simply bring water to Egypt, but it also was a source of fertile soil from the mountains of Ethiopia, carried by the river Nile all the way to Egypt. And as you know, Egypt is one of the great agricultural countries in North Africa. Okay, that is possible because of the soil that the river Nile carries with it. Now, so the Egyptians had a kind of the Egyptian manifest destiny for themselves. Anybody knows this guy? Okay, nobody here is from the 1990s or 80s. Okay, this guy is originally from Egypt. His name is Dr. Boutros Ghali. He's an Egyptian foreign minister before he became the UN Secretary General for one term in the 1990s. And during his term, he was known to have clashed with President Bill Clinton and his administration very, very fiercely. We're not going into that detail. However, we will focus on what this man thinks as a strategist for the Egyptian foreign diplomacy or foreign policy. This man was, to me, like the Henry Kissinger of Egypt. He shaped Egyptian foreign policy, particularly with regards to the Horn of Africa, significantly. Of course, the policy, its root is deep embedded in Egyptian identity and Egyptian economy. However, as far as we know, no one strategized it before him as he did, particularly when it comes to the modern world. So what did Boutros Ghali did? Boutros Ghali, he was a realist. What are realists when it comes to political science or political philosophy? Realists believe that the world is anarchy, right? It's anarchy. And in anarchy, what you need is, or what you have actually is, those who dominate and those who submit. Those who dominate get everything, while those who submit will have to give everything, every resource that the dominant ones require of them. So this is how the world runs, according to realists. Who is the current one of the famous realist politicians? I don't know if you are into politics, like John Mearsheimer of University of Chicago. If you hear his podcasts or you read his books, he gives this realist political philosophy a very easy and simplified, accessible version to those of you who are interested in reading more about this. So was Dr. Boutros Ghali. And he believed for Egypt to secure its dominance on the Nile and on the Red Sea was a matter of existence. If Egypt loses its dominance, or if it cannot ascertain its dominance over the Nile River and the Red Sea, he thought Egypt is cooked. Okay, that's what he thought. Egypt is cooked. So he started to practice this very aggressive policy towards the Horn region, where the Nile River comes from. He wanted to ascertain that Egypt has it all. Okay, who is the competitor in that region? Well, this country called Ethiopia. Why? Because the water comes from there. This is a quote from him. He said, "The next war in our region will be over waters of the Nile, not politics," he said, "not borders, not arable lands, not people moving from one border to another. No. Water will be the source of our conflict." And with this mentality, he tried to give the Egyptian diplomacy a foundation that makes sure that the Horn of Africa never stands as an organized entity. It always remains weak, so that it doesn't, like the Horn of Africa, does not ascertain or establish its dominance on the Red Sea and the Nile. Egypt, these are trivias about Egypt, okay? And these trivias, however, are very important trivias. It is today 118 million people. And per day, it needs 164.4 billion liters of water every single day. And lots of it is needed for agriculture. And at least there are 18 universities in Egypt that are engaged in hydrology and water resource research. Let me give you another trivia. Between 2019 and 2024, 1,200 academic papers were written from Egypt just on water, just on how to manage water resources. Egyptian hydrologists are one of the best when it comes to hydrology. Why? Because it's a matter of survival for them. And there is that consciousness. How about the Red Sea? Okay. The Red Sea is very important for Egypt because there is this thing called the Suez Canal. Do you know what happened a couple of years ago when that ship blocked the Suez Canal? Yeah, world trade was in tatters, right? It was shivering. Why? Because that is a main route to European trade and also for American trade, particularly for global oil trade. And half of European trade, international trade, passes through that vein. So it's very important. And there is no other option for it. And Egypt gains $6 billion per annum just by having the Suez Canal. But in order for the Suez Canal, which is right here, to function, the Red Sea needs to be controlled as a safe passageway to ships that come and go through the Suez Canal. It's only when the ships come and go that Egypt can gain $86 billion. So it's very important for Egypt. So as you can see, Egypt is far, far away from the Horn of Africa, right? There is a big country here called Sudan between the Horn of Africa and Egypt. But the Red Sea comes all the way down here. And the Nile River comes all the way down here and starts here and here down in the mountainous countries. So this is why Egypt is determined to ascertain its dominance. Nile is water and the Suez Canal is money. And so Egypt had to defend its interests. And to defend its interests, it uses different approaches. And one of the approaches is this institution called the Arab League. The Arab League is organized and led by Egypt. And whatever Egypt says, the Arab League endorses. There is a similar institution in the Horn of Africa. It's called IGAD. It's a parallel institution to the Arab League. And IGAD is led by Ethiopia. Whatever Ethiopia says, IGAD confirms almost. So countries use these kind of institutions for leverage, for influence, for bringing everybody else in support of their agendas. Another very important point I want you to remember here is all these countries that you see here, Yemen, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, these are the oil-rich countries, right? The oil-rich countries, here, the Persian Gulf, Jordan, these. However, these oil-rich countries do not produce their own food. They don't have enough arable lands and enough water to support agriculture that can sustain a huge population. So where do they get their food from? Here is the arable land. Sudan. Sudan is the arable land, the agricultural land for the people in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea, eastern coast countries. So they also have a stake in the waters of the Nile. So no wonder they support Egyptian cause whenever it comes. So they have a stake in whatever goes on in the Horn of Africa. If the Horn of Africa stays strong, if the Horn of Africa is considered a united one country that could leverage its power and that could ascertain its power over this Red Sea coast and this Indian Ocean and this very narrow strait called the Bab el Mandeb, they have to negotiate. And who wants to negotiate? If you can, everybody wants to avoid negotiation and have it all, you know? So they try to make sure they have a leverage against the Horn of African countries, and they try to make sure they try to support all these different movements in the region. So Egypt and the Arabian countries, led by Egypt, have that interest in the region. And the threat is this very old, ancient state called the Ethiopians, or in today's terms, the Ethiopians, the Eritreans, and the Djiboutis, and the Somalians, and the Somalilands. They are the threat, particularly when it comes to the Nile, the place where this river comes from. The Ethiopian highlands is controlled by the Ethiopians, so the Ethiopians become the threat. Now, this threat, Ethiopia, usually it's called the roof of Africa. Why? Because somewhere around 75–80% of the African high mountains are found in the region. It's a very, very mountainous region. This southern Eritrea, northern Ethiopia, all the way to central Ethiopia, all the way to this, or North Kenya. So, and in history, this region, give and take, had a long identity as in state formation. So they were not simply pastoralists and cattle herders. These are people who know and have lived as states or states. Sometimes they cooperate, sometimes they fight. Sometimes their state is larger, sometimes it's fragmented into different pieces, but they understand to stand as a political entity. This is a very important trait of the people in this region. So, currently now, this threat, just if you take Ethiopia, 35.5 million people, and it adds 4 million people every year. And on top of that, you can add Eritrea, which has about 4 to 6 million. It's difficult to get data these days, but 4 to 6 million people maximum. And you have somewhere around 25 million people in Somalia. And you have 1 million people in Djibouti. So all in all, you have about how many people? 160 million people, give and take. Okay. So this is big. This is like half of the United States of America. And the United States is, remember, 8 times size-wise, 8 times bigger than Ethiopia. Ethiopia is 1 million square meters, and the United States is 8 million. So it's 8 times, but it has only a double fold of the people in this region. So you can imagine how densely populated the region is. Another very important history, another very important trait in understanding the politics of this region is this land, particularly this colored as white, Ethiopia, into today's Ethiopia, it has never been colonized by any foreign power. Never, ever, as far as history goes. There were always attempts, but they never succeeded. So this is part of their identity. This is part of their statehood history. They understand themselves as the people who stand their ground whenever a threat is around. Does this make sense? Am I making sense? Okay. So this is their identity. And another very interesting fact about this region is its ethnic diversity. This is a part that the people who see this region as a threat will play to get an advantage against the region. There are about 80 plus ethnic diversities, ethnic groups, many languages, many dialects. Of course, some of them are much more dominant than the others, like the Oromo, the Amharic, Tigrinya, Somali, Afar. These are like Walaita. These are the major groups of the region, Sidama. And these people, I want you to remember one fact. They occupied the region for thousands of years. And these current borders are enforced upon them. For instance, this part of Horn of Africa is called Somalia, right? And the one in the northern part of Somalia is called Somaliland. And this region in eastern Ethiopia is called Ethiopian Somali. You know what? Because the same people live in all those regions. That's why. The borders do not reflect the people's identity and the people's history. You go to current Eritrea, this is Eritrea now, and this is Ethiopia. From this point onwards, you see the same people living on both sides of the border. Tigrinya speaking, Saho speaking, Arab speaking people, and Afar people living in both sides of the Eritrean and the Ethiopian border. So the border doesn't really get the fact how the people live. Between Djibouti and Ethiopia, and Djibouti and Somalia, yeah, you go to Djibouti, the 1 million people you see there, some of them are Somalis, the others are Afars and Isas. And those people live in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, in Somalia, without any problem. And they move about, irrespective of the border. Today, you will see an Afari leading his camels into Ethiopia, the Ethiopian border, and a week after, probably he's going back to his wife in Eritrea. And a week later, probably he's visiting his uncle in Djibouti. They don't need passports because this is their region. This is how their ancestors lived in this region. So these borders were enforced on them after colonialism came into Africa and partitioned, carved off those coastal regions into different countries, as Somalia, as Eritrea, as Somaliland. So the borders are so porous. When the Ethiopia and Eritrea were separated, particularly after the war in 2000, they had to divide a house into two, into two places, because the border really doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. So how do you neutralize a threat geopolitically? Okay, now I showed you, okay, the Egyptians have interests. They have their own manifest destiny. And the Horn of Africa is a diverse region with a very long history of statehood. and freedom and a lot of resources. So how do you neutralize a threat? Well, geopolitically, this is how it goes. You create political instability. You make the country to be politically unstable. How do you do that? Usually, you create economic strain. Okay? You make it difficult for the people to live in. If you try to invade this region, I will show you later, that plan will literally fail apart. Like it will fall apart. It will fail. Because the moment they see a foreigner coming, they will gang up against you. So to weaken a country, the best option or the best card you have is the country itself, and exploiting different fissures and divisions in the community, in the society. That will create political instability, that will create economic strain, and that will result a failed state. Okay, a failed state. What are the tools? Well, we have the CBGB. These are the major political tools that one creates a failed state, or weaken a state or a country. The first is capital flight. You make sure capital does not stay in that country, meaning money doesn't stay in that country through different means. Illegal money exchange, illegal money transfers, illegal trades. Through those kinds of routes, you try to make sure that the money always flows out of the country instead of staying in the country and generate more money. The second is blockade. You block the country to the best of your capacity from the rest of regional economic integration or regional economic flow, and also international trade. Even if you cannot completely block a country from international trade, you make it difficult for them. Okay? You try to make it as costly as possible. And then this, however, does not stop the country for seeking growth and infrastructure development. So how do you do, if you don't have money, how do you develop infrastructure? You go into debt. You go into national debt, and your national debt grows and grows and grows and grows until it makes the life of the poor and the downtrodden class impossible, and then everything explodes. Okay? So the growing national debt, the economic crisis, the economic difficulty creates popular discontent on the ruling class. And when the popular discontent explodes, if you want that country to stay weak, you intervene in two ways. One, you intervene as a peacemaker. You send your troops as peacemakers, and they make sure that country stays divided and the people at one another's throat. Another one is you support different factions, different groups, so that they stay in the discontent and in the disruption business. Okay? This is what we see Egypt doing. By the way, I'm not labeling Egypt as bad. No, I'm telling you what the situation is like. Okay. Okay. So Egypt sponsors, for instance, whatever liberation group or liberation front is in the region. If you are like, as long as you are against the central government, you will certainly have financial, military, training, diplomatic support from the Egyptian state. They don't deny this. Trust me. They say this. They say this in public. I'm not making this up like to make them look bad. Okay. Why? Because as I told you, if the Horn of African countries, particularly the economic base, so the country we call Ethiopia, gets stronger, it's going to assert its dominance on the Red Sea because it has enough people, more than Egypt, and enough resources, enough waters, enough hideouts to ascertain its dominance on the Nile and the Red Sea. So Egypt sponsors anything that keeps, the Horn of Africa rattled, particularly Ethiopia. Let's hear this video from, he's speaking in Tigrinya. Those of you who know Tigrinya, you will hear what he's saying. And those of you who don't know, there is a subtitle in English, so please look at that subtitle. I think it's third video. And then we'll go.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
This is President Isaias Afwerki. He's still the president of Eritrea. He has been the leader of that country since 1991 de facto, and he's still there. And his family, his mother and his brothers, they live in California. They don't live. But he is the leader of Eritrea. No one was arguing against the Eritrean bill more than the Egyptian government. Like they were arguing for. That's what he said. Why? There are different historical reasons. What Ethiopia?
ዓብዪ ስትራቴጂያዊ ፀገም ዝምሲ ናይ ኒል ማይ ኣብዚ ማያት ዝህልው ቁፅጣር ናይ ግጭ ዘይምርግጋእ ናይ ደም ዓዊት ማይ ዝገሰሉ ቦታ ዘለዎ ሃገራት መፃኢ ኢልን ዝብል እምነት ነይርዎ እዚ ኣሉታዊ ጠማምታት ዝኸበይሩ ማሕቢሉ ኣብ ናይ ግብፂ ፖለቲከኛታት ናቱ ታሪክ ኣለዎ ካልእ ስትራቴጂያዊ ጠማምታ ናይ ግብፂ ዝበሃል ናይ ቀይሕ ባሕሪ እዩ ቀይሕ ባሕርን ምቁፅፃር ናይ ቀይሕ ባሕርን መን ቀይሕ ባሕሪ ዝቁፃፀር ዓይነቱ ኣጠማምታ ነርሱ ንነዊሕ ግዜ ተመከራኻሪ ጉዳይ ኮይኑ ዝሰርሕ ነዞም ክልተ ግምታት እዚኣቶም የርብሑና እዮም ኢሎም ስለዝሓስቡ ብዙሓት ፖለቲከኛታት ኣብዚ ከባቢ ምርግጋእ ከይህሉ ንሰብዓ ኤርትራ ናይ ባሕሪ ክደግፍ መሃር ዘይኮነ ከም መሳርሒ ክጥቀመሉ ምፍታን እንበይኖም መልክዓት ዝሓዙ ዝናታት መድብሉ ሰሪሖም ኣብ መወዳእታ ግን ኣብ ግዜ ረፈረንዱም ተካሂዱ ኤርትራ ናፃ ክትከውን የብላ ተባሂሉ ስለምንታይ ኤርትራ ናፃ እንድሕር ኮይና ኣብ ኣፍሪካ ምክልኻል ዝስእን እዩ ዘይምርግጋእ ሰንኪ ክኸውን እዩ ንካልኦት ሕማቅ ኣብነት ክኸውን እናተባሃለ ብዙሕ ተሳቆታት ገጢሙና ዝኾነ ክሳብ ረፈረንዱም ንበፅሕ ተጋፅና ሓሊፍናዮም ድሕሪኡ ኣብዚ ከባቢ ኣብ መንጎ ዝተፈላለዩ ሃገራት ዘሎ ዝምድናታት ብፍላይ ኣብ መንጎ ኤርትራን ኢትዮጵያን ዘሎ ዝምድና ብፅቡቅ እናማዕበለ ክኸይድ ንርአዮም ብብዙሓት ፖለቲከኛታት ክስደት ኣይኮኑ ካብኡ ሓሊፉ ኣብ መንጎ ዞባ ቀርኒ ኣፍሪካ ኣብ መንጎ ዝተፈላለዩ ሃገራት ዝነብሩ ዘሎ ዝምድና ጥራሕ ኣይኮኖም እዚ እውን ኣብ ደንበዮም ኣጋጣሚታት ብጋሊ ዝዛረብሉ ጉዳይ ንሕና እዚ ይኹን እዚ ናታቶም ኣተሓሳስባ ብዘይገድፍ መስመርና ሒዝና ዝምልከተና ጉዳይ እናሰራሕና ክንጓዓዝ ፀኒሕና
That's good. You understand what he means, right? You see his point. This man today is, in loggerheads, like in very difficult position with the Ethiopian government. That this is not related. Like he said this not in relation with what's going on between Ethiopia and Eritrea today. So this is 1996. Probably most of you are not born. So this is the reality. Okay. They make sure the region stays unstable. Why? because they have to ascertain their dominance on those two waters. How do you keep the region unstable? Well, it's very easy. You support different liberation fronts. I had a list. I then deleted the slide. Like I had a list of how many liberation fronts the Egyptian government sponsored since the 1950s, the 1960s. Whatever liberation front, whatever disruptive military group, paramilitary group is formed in the Horn of Africa, particularly in Ethiopia, Eritrea, it gets full support from the Egyptian government. As he said, when the Eritreans were fighting against the Eritrean, not all Eritreans, because there were Eritreans who died wanting to stay united with Ethiopia, but the Eritrean Liberation Front, when it was fighting against the Ethiopian central government, there were the Egyptian supporters from different directions, one coming directly, the other indirectly through Saudi Arabia, through financial, military support, diplomatic coverage, and news coverage, and all that thing, the whole 9 yards, when they were fighting. And then when they were thinking about, okay, the fight is over now, we have won, let's gain our independence. The Egyptians were just like, you won, and like now you are about to become a country. Okay, it's a problem. Why? Because probably you will be stable. You'll be stable. Like, we don't want you to be stable. We want you to stay disrupted. So they were not that happy about it, but at least they tried to make sure they gain one thing from this division, which is this: the removal of Ethiopia from the Red Sea. This was Ethiopia. This was the Eritrea in 1977. And then this was the Ethiopian interior regional map in 1987. Okay. So this is 1,000 kilometers coastline on the Red Sea, on the west coast of the Red Sea. And then here is the reality of Ethiopia in 2020, since 1991. Ethiopia is carved out of the Red Sea and blocked from international trade, international sea access. Okay, there is a lot that I can tell you. Like when this government came in 1991, supported by Egypt, when they came to power, one of the first things that they did was to dismantle the entire national army, which was 500,000 strong, and to literally destroy the navy of the country that stayed for about, give and take, 40 years. They dismantled. Why? And they also dismantled another irrigation project on the Nile. This is the Ethiopian government doing. Why? Because it came to power in 1991, sponsored by Egypt again. So if Egypt pays the bills for you, then you do what Egypt tells you. I think it's time to get a break now. And if you would like to take a break, let's have 10 minutes break and come back, and we'll look at some more stuff after this.
Yes, it absolutely does. Recording. Okay.
Okay. So, welcome back. This is the map. Now Ethiopia is carved out, and Djibouti is highly militarized and economically insignificant, like when it comes to self-sustaining, economically insignificant country. And Somaliland is a country or a region in the country called Somalia, but is not in full communion and communication with Somalia. So the Horn of Africa is carved off from the economic base where the water and the arable land exists. This is where the waters are from. This is where the mountains are, and it's from the mountains that the waters descend to these lowland areas. This is a lowland area. This is also a lowland area to the west. Let's focus on the east now. And these waters, they come from here, from the mountainous region, and they flow down here. Because the waters have a longer time flowing in this region, there is a lot of agriculture that happens and that can happen here to sustain everybody. That means settlement, economic activity, capital building is possible in this region. This is the economic base of the Horn of Africa. But now that economic base is carved off from international trade. Remember what I told you, how to keep a country weak. Blockade, division, popular discontent. Okay, now let's talk, but where does this come from? Is this something that just happened in the late 1990s and 1980s when Boutros Ghali came to power as the foreign minister of Egypt? No. Egypt always had its eyes on controlling the Nile for a long time, okay? And the Ethiopians knew that Egypt is unlivable without the Nile, even 1,000 years ago. They understood this. Because when the Egyptians, particularly because the Egyptian Christians and the Ethiopian Christians belong to one church called the Oriental Orthodox today, in today's terms, and the Egyptian Christians were under Muslim rule while the Ethiopian Christians had their own empire. Whenever the Egyptian Christians were persecuted by their Muslim rulers for different reasons, the Ethiopian emperors sometimes threatened the Egyptian caliphs by sending this message. Unless you stop abusing the Christians in Egypt, we will block the Nile. They used to say that. They threatened the Egyptian rulers by referring to the Nile and how they can use it. Now, particularly now, let's go to the 1800s and what happened, because that's when modern Egypt starts to come about. In Egypt, as you know, Egypt was hardly a free country throughout its history after the pharaohs. I mean, it was ruled by every single empire that comes about. Okay, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, it continues. And when the Ottoman Turks were ruling Egypt, they brought these people from Central Asia. And some of those people who came to the Ottoman Empire and were settled in Egypt and in its vicinities that was considered as part of Egypt, they developed a dynasty, particularly in this part of Sudan. And that dynasty called the Muhammad Ali dynasty. And the Muhammad Ali dynasty in the 1800s, late 1800s, started to reinvent, to restructure Egypt with American veterans. These people that you see here, probably from your American history classes, you know them. Thaddeus Phillips, William Loring, Charles Pomeroy Stone, Alexander Reynolds, Charles Field, Henry Sibley, and Richard Savage. Savage or Savage? Savage. Okay. Richard Savage. So these people were veterans of the American Civil War. You know the American Civil War, right? Everybody knows it. Okay, I'm not as, I don't blame you if you don't know about it. It's okay. It's just one history in the world. Okay. So these people, some of them fought on the Union side, some of them fought on the Confederate side. But after the Civil War ended, they had to look for jobs. So Egypt was hiring with a lot of money, with a lot of ambition to build its own empire because it wants to gain independence from the Ottoman Turks. Okay, there is that desire. And also the French and the British were kind of meddling around the region and trying to have influence over the trade in this region. There is a desire to build a canal, the Suez Canal. Okay, so there is a lot of ambition, political ambition, economic ambition, and plan and vacancy. So these guys got hired, these generals. They went into Egypt and got huge positions in restructuring and recreating the Egyptian military. Particularly by the time of Khedive Ismail Pasha. This is this guy. Looks nice. He's a very handsome guy. So this is him, and these are, can you guess who these are? Anybody? Children? No. A little high, a little higher. Yes, they are all women names. Yes, these are his wives and concubines. Yeah, and so yeah, it's a lot of work, man. Like to think about all these men and to think about also political dominance. It's a lot of work. So, but this is the guy. He's a very handsome guy, as you can see. He started to think about Egyptian dominance, both in the Red Sea and the Nile. And he said this: my country is no longer only in Africa. We are now part of Europe too. It is therefore natural for us to abandon our former ways and to adopt a new system adapted to our social conditions. So he's eyeing Europe as a model to imitate.
Someone is playing audio.
No,
It's the other classroom. Okay.
Okay. I'll try to scream. Okay. So with this intention, he was first in Sudan, in what we call today is Sudan, and with this imperial ambition, Egypt annexed the Darfur region. Okay, the Darfur means this is the kingdom of Fur, the Sultanate of Fur, that was there for many years before it was annexed by the Egyptians in 1874. So you can see, like, there is this rising ambition among the Egyptians, and this guy started to assert, and he saw the importance of asserting the two waters dominance for Egypt. So whatever Boutros Ghali was doing actually was not his invention. It was an already existing Egyptian desire and policy and attempt. So he hired one general, one mercenary, a Swiss mercenary named Werner Munzinger in 1875. And then he gave him about 300 soldiers, and he sent him to Ethiopia to, to loiter and to see what can be done to conquer the highland region where the River Nile comes from. However, in 1975, these soldiers, Egyptian soldiers led by Werner Munzinger, came to Ethiopia through Tajura, what we call today as Djibouti, and they didn't even have the chance to meet the Ethiopian army. They were entirely wiped out by an Ethiopian coastal people called the Afar people, who live in what today's Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. They wiped them out. There's only a few of them who survived to tell the story, including Werner Munzinger himself, who was killed, the general. And then 1976, they prepared more soldiers, about 17,000 to be exact. And then they came to Ethiopia. And there was a huge battle between the Ethiopian army, the Ethiopian King Emperor Johannes IV, and the Khedive Ismail Pasha forces led by General Loring. The Egyptian forces, besides the American veteran General Loring, were led by the commander-in-chief was Khedive Ismail Pasha's son. But after the Battle of Gura, this is Gundat and Gura, these are two places in today's terms, in Eritrea. The Egyptian army fled and they never looked back again until a little while. They were completely defeated. The Ethiopians used actually according to General Loring, who wrote about it in details because he was an eyewitness. He gives us all this detailed account of the war. He has a book. And in that book, he tells us the Ethiopians really terrorized the Egyptians. How did they go with? They captured some of the Egyptians, and then they inflicted some wounds upon them, and then they sent them back to the Egyptian camp completely naked. And this horrified the Egyptians. And some of the Egyptians really could not have the stamina to stand against the Ethiopian army after that time, including the son of Khedive Ismail Pasha, who fled the battery, the cannon, and just the last time he was seen in person was boarding a boat to Egypt. This is not me narrating, this is just recorded by General Loring himself. So some 8,500 Egyptians were killed, 1,000 were wounded, 2,300 were captured. So this is a huge loss for the Egyptian army. And after this, Khedive Ismail Pasha really could not continue his imperial ambitions. He collapsed, and the French and the Brits removed him from power very quickly after that. They removed him from power. And he died in Turkey or Turkey as simply nobody, like almost nobody, with no money, no power, just ignored. And then the French and the British, with Egyptian support, they had the Suez Canal at this time. This is the greatest achievement of that time, which became an income earning source for Egypt for years to come. Okay. However, there was another very important incident that happened in this region in the late 1800s that shaped the geopolitics of the region. This is the Adwa shock. This is from the New York Times, March 2nd, 1896. This is the New York Times. Italy's terrible defeat. 3,000 men killed, 60 guns and all provisions lost. Baratieri's strategy condemned. All available streams of transport, steamers of transport reinforcement to Abyssinian are ordered. Persistent rumor of fall of ministers fall to Te Deum and diplomatic banquet counter demanded by Pope Eritrean colony. Okay. What happened in Adwa? Let's watch a video. This. What is Adwa? Why is it so significant?
Where's my cursor? Is it this one?
No.
Not this one. Not that one. We watched that one.
Then if we
This
click
one?
no, that will be the dam.
Okay. Give me 1 second then. Let me get my cursor back. Where's my
Mm.
cursor? Okay. And
Didn't I include the latest link into the list? So,
okay, these are the ones.
okay.
Do you have any idea?
Yes, we can find it on the slide.
Oh, it's on the slide.
Yes. Yep. It's this one.
Okay. Get
Mhm.
the cursor. Where's the cursor? Here we go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is Addis Ababa. This is the capital of Ethiopia, and you are looking at something. Thank you. That's it. What did you see? What is it? Yes, a memorial of what? Okay, this is the museum for the victory of Adwa. Like there is a whole museum for it. Like the Ethiopians built a whole museum for it, like naming a street and naming a place or naming a couple of schools was not enough. They had to build this huge, huge complex as a museum for the Adwa victory. And it was recently inaugurated a couple of years ago, particularly and in line with like today's Ethiopian politics, which is more into the right, kind of center right. What happened at Adwa? Adwa is the battle between Italy and Ethiopia. As you know, the Europeans tried to carve out Africa to themselves in 1884, called the Congo Conference. You know the Congo Conference? Okay, how about the Berlin Conference? You have heard about the Berlin Conference, right? But you don't know, like you haven't heard it's named as the Congo Conference. Okay. Yeah. Because even when the narrative, you see how narratives are built? Even when you narrate about the bad things that are done by Europeans, you have to refer to a European city instead of the most important place that they colonize, like some of their important colonies in Africa. Congo is in Central Africa, and it's 76 times bigger than Belgium. Yes, 76 times bigger than Belgium, and was not even the colony of Belgium. Instead, it was the private property of King Leopold. This is the Belgian king. It was his property. So his relatives, some of the European leaders, they envied him, like, we have all that and we don't have any. So there was that ambition. And in the 1800s, because of the political development in Europe, all the Europeans are now wanting to have wanting to expand their empires across Africa. So in Berlin, they gathered and they decided, okay, let's carve out Africa for ourselves so that we don't fight against one another. And they never consulted Africans. No African was represented in that conference. So when that happened, at that time, part of the European powers who were desiring to have this portion of Africa for themselves was Italy. One of them was Italy. And the part of Africa that Italy wanted was the Horn of Africa. Okay? Does this make sense? Does it make sense? Are you okay? All right. So they wanted to carve out the Horn of Africa for themselves, and they saw that it will be difficult for them to subjugate Ethiopia because they just learned what happened to the Egyptian army in the 1870s. Okay. So while that memory is fresh, they didn't really want to simply go and try to conquer Ethiopia, like as they did to other African countries. Instead, they wanted to butter their way up by signing treaties with Ethiopians, particularly this king called Menelik II. And this is an Ethiopian portrait of Menelik II, and his very powerful, very influential, very wise wife named Taitu Beto. The Italians in 1889 tried to sign a treaty with Menelik at this place called Wuchale. This is in a place in northern Ethiopia. And in that treaty, particularly Article 17, Article 17, they put this problematic sentence that says, Ethiopia, if it wants to, can do all its communication to other countries through Italy. This is the Amharic version. The Italian version says Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Empire, if it wants to have international communication, it should do it only through Italy. Okay? That is the Italian version. The Ethiopian version says, the Amharic version says, like, it can do if it chooses to, but the Italian version says it should. And the Ethiopian king and his royal family, none of them knew Italian, so they saw the Amharic version and they thought, okay, yeah, this is a good deal. We'll have good relationship with you. Why? Because the Ethiopian kings considered themselves as Christian kings, and they saw themselves as one of the important Christendoms of the world. And they always considered themselves that they need to have this Christian formation, like this bond with other Christian empires, okay, to build the world Christendom together. This is their thought. This is their imagination. Where did it come from? Of course, the medieval ages, and how they considered what the church, okay, this is called ecclesiology. Their thought about being a Christian, being a church, is pretty much a statehood. And as a state, you need to have good relationship with other states that have the same ideology as yours. It's as simple as that, particularly when you have such a big empire as the Ottomans. Okay? So they thought that they were forming this good deal with the Italians, but the Italians had something else in mind. They already were in the northern shores, in the northeastern shores of the country, and they were staying there. Okay, and they are signing this treaty to cheat the Ethiopians to sign away their freedom. And this linguistic trick, however, didn't stay that long, because the Ethiopians understood what was behind this treaty later. Because when they tried to communicate with others, they noticed the Italians were uneasy about it, and the Italians started to demand, like, how dare you communicate with others except through us? And they was like, what? Who said that? Like, we said that. And then, okay, let's fight. And there was one general called General Baratieri, and he went to, he's an Italian general, of course. He said, I will bring this African monkey in a cage and make him a spectacle in Rome. He said that. Yeah, it's nasty. It's nasty. He said that on record. And, well, because of that, the Italian army sent somewhere about 18,000 soldiers to attack Ethiopia and to subjugate Ethiopia. And there we had the battle on March 1st, 1896 in this place called Adwa. And Ethiopia kind of mustered 130,000 people. And from the entire region, from different ethnic groups, everybody was there. Why? Because the call from this guy was still studied in military schools as a good call that presented the cause, the threat, the place of meeting, and what they are about to do very clearly. And he declared, okay, meet me at this place and this time on this day, and we are under threat from these guys. We are going out to fight. And they fought, and yes, they won. Because of this, Ethiopia remained uncolonized. The Italians were defeated. Many people were in Italy were infuriated because their young boys, their soldiers, lost their lives in this foreign land which they were trying to conquer. However, this would leave a wound in the Italian soul. The Italians would feel very bad about themselves and very bad for losing this battle, and other Europeans will start to mock them. Even today, if you ask Europeans, how is how is the military situation or the military stamina of the Italians, they'll say, "Oh, no, not so much. The Italians, not so much." They'll say that. So it left a stain in the military reputation of the Italians. And this would result the desire for revenge. Even though Ethiopia defeated the Italians in the Battle of Adwa in 1896, it didn't push them out of Africa. It just pushed them from expanding to the Central Highlands, and it limited them into the northern part of the country, northeastern part of the country, on the western shores of the Red Sea, in the place we have what we call today as Eritrea. Okay? And let's have this look. And now these people, these Eritrean
dance is more than just using your body. So much dances in your
Lord have mercy. Okay. Now, the Italians would want to avenge themselves to bring their reputation back, particularly when Mussolini rose to power. Okay, this is in the 1930s. And Mussolini will use his two colonies in the Horn of Africa. That would be Eritrea, and in the south they have southern Somalia, as basis for the military attack on the Central Highland. Let's look at this video for a short while, and because it's done well. I really believe it's done well. Well done video. Okay, this is too long. War at hand, Mussolini defiant as Ethiopia rushes new army to front. Okay, this is where the war starts, 1935. Okay. The person that you see on the screen is Emperor Haile Selassie. This is Emperor Haile Selassie. We'll see another picture of him later. He came to power in 1923, and he was close to power. He's the son of the general, one of the generals of Menelik II, the guy like the king who led the victory of Adwa, and he became king, and then he became the king of kings. And soon after, one of the first things that he did was to make Ethiopia part of the League of Nations. Anybody knows the League of Nations? This is an international body equivalent to the United Nations back in the days, the League of Nations. It was supposed to bring peace and unity and cooperation between different countries. And Ethiopia, Liberia, and South Africa were the first and the only African countries that joined the League of Nations because they were the only free countries. Why? Liberia was established by people who were freed from America, the American slavery, and South Africa because it was a British territory led by white South Africans, immigrants from Europe who settled there and who have become native South Africans. Okay, so these were the only free spots in the entire region, and Ethiopia was the only country that fought for its freedom, that preserved its freedom, and that retained its freedom to join this League of Nations from Africa. And when Italy invaded Ethiopia for a second time in 1935, he was the king of Ethiopia, the king of kings, the emperor of Ethiopia, and you will hear what he does. Okay, this is Italian Somaliland, and here is Eritrea. And as any colonizer, you would want to join two of your colonies. It's natural. And what is standing in between? This free place called Ethiopia. So you have to defeat that. This is the French Somaliland, and this is the British Somaliland. This is how the coast of Horn of Africa was carved out. This is how these countries were created. Okay. Remember this map. It will come back. You will see it later. So Italy used these two bases to attack the Central Highland. And Haile Selassie mobilized almost the entire population. That was the call, because Ethiopia did not really have a strong army base. It was just starting to come out of the Middle Ages and start everything, all these, to build all these institutions. But it did not have enough time and enough resources and enough connection, enough trained manpower to build its institutions, its defense industry. So Italy started the war in 1935.
Has already shown us the Ethiopians swarming north to Eritrea and the massing of Mussolini's features in Eritrea. And now the tribesmen are hurrying south towards Somaliland. We go by railroad across the Eyewash River to Harar, the southern war capital. The train rattles across desolate country the Italians will have to fight across. Then we come
Listen to him.
River and Red. And inevitable target for sky attack. It's the Eyewash River, but it will be no Eyewash when the bombers come. European diplomats leading the war-haunted country. This railroad is of vital importance.
Okay, did you hear the comment that he was making about the Awash River? He was naming it as Eyewash River. And he said, it won't be an eyewash when the bombs come. Why do you think he said that? Any thoughts? The Eyewash River. Okay. The misreading was probably intentional, but the pun he's trying to make is because of the type of bombs that the Italians would use against the Ethiopian army. The Italians will use mustard gas. Okay? This is how big the Italian army was. 500,000 troops, 500 tanks, 1,500 artillery, 350 aircraft, 15,000 machine guns, 19,000 vehicles, mustard gas on top of that, and arsenic bombs. And these two weapons were prohibited from use by the League of Nations. And Ethiopia was part of the League of Nations. In 1936, Emperor Haile Selassie left the country, went to the UK. From the UK, he went to Geneva and asked for help from the international community. The international community, first, as soon as this incident between Ethiopia and Italy started at this place called Walwal, they said, we have imposed military sanctions on both parties. The game of both parties in geopolitics. Italy at this time does not need any kind of international support to make its weapons, while Ethiopia needed to buy whatever armaments it had. So the sanction actually was in favor of Italy. Then in 1936, when Emperor Haile Selassie went to the League of Nations to appeal, this is what happened. Not this, but the one that comes after it.
At the League of Nations, a grave disturbance. Today, Haile Selassie comes to plead for his lost empire. He wants them to make Mussolini give up Ethiopia. The Geneva crowds are for him, but the exiled emperor will need his imperturbable dignity before the day is over. British Foreign Minister Eden, Soviet Delegate Litvinov on the left, and French Premier Blum, and all the statesmen, instead of helping Haile Selassie, have decided to lift the sanctions against Italy. The introduction of the emperor in English. In the shadows of the press gallery, Italian newspaper men are ready for an outbreak against the emperor whose country their country has taken, waiting for his first word. Yeah.
This is the Italian journalists who were trying to heckle him. And they heckled him well, but they didn't stop him from making his speech. And that this is the most famous speech that he has ever made. And in this speech, Emperor Haile Selassie said, okay, this is 1936. What is happening in Germany? The Third Reich is rising, right? In Italy, it's the brown shirts are already, the black shirts are already there. The brown shirts, the black shirts, whatever they call them. And he's telling them, however, yeah, and the British and the French were assisting Italy actively by supporting the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. And he said, okay, today it is you, today it's us, but tomorrow it will be you. That's what he said. That's his famous line. Today it's us, but tomorrow it's you. And lo and behold, the Second World War exploded soon after. And the Ethiopian soldiers, who were only about 250,000 and only a few, about 7 tanks and about 8 transport airplanes, were completely crushed by the Italian army. And then Italy was able to come to Addis and control the capital city. However, the soldiers, even though half of them were incinerated by the arsenic bombs and mustard gases, whoever left went into the mountains, and there was the 5 years of resistance fighting. And in 1940, Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, resigned, and Winston Churchill came, and then the geopolitics shifted. Okay, and the UK became the enemy of Italy. And that gave Emperor Haile Selassie support. And 1941, the resistance was supported by the British, and the Ethiopians also were able to gain more weapons from the international aids. And Emperor Haile Selassie came into the capital victoriously after 5 years. Okay. Now, this is a very brief introduction of the Horn of Africa as it began its modern age. After this, 1974, Emperor Haile Selassie will be dethroned by a coup d'etat that was highly mobilized by communist student movement, socialist communist student movement that started in the country. And then that movement, however, would be hijacked by a military junta, and the military junta will stay for 17 years. But after 17 years, those rebel groups which were based on ethno-nationalism, they were supported by Egypt, and they came to power on 1991, and Ethiopia was cut off from the Red Sea, and the major irrigation development that was done around the River Nile was dismantled by the Ethiopian government. Okay, and then 2018, now the Ethiopia has, after 27 years of rule by the regime that came in 1991, today they have a new government. And this new government is a kind of an offshoot of the coalition that was formed by the government that came in to power in 1991. But this government follow a different ideology, and it is pretty much, it follows a reinvigorated nationalism and national identity than tribal identities, and asserting the country's national and geopolitical interests have become the new trend in Ethiopian politics, which has shifted the geopolitics very, very, very greatly. This dam that you saw, they just completed it, and it's dragged for 14 years. Yes, it dragged for 14 years because even though it was started 14 years ago, the government was not able to finish it because of a lot of corruption. The new government came in 2018, and they made it their project. And they were able to finish it in about 6 years. So there is a shift of mentality. The government before 2018 is more left-wing government, more into tribal identities. But this one is more into national identities, more into a national and unifying narrative and rhetoric. Let's look at another very important country in the region. This is Somalia. Somalia is, this was, as I told you before, colonized by Italy, and then that part was colonized by the British. However, when the British and the Italians were out of the region, these two were determined to be two different countries, but somehow some people were like, we are one Somali people. Why don't we have one country? And then they became one country. Even though the British Somaliland already had become a country at that time. They said, let's unite, and they united. However, since 1991, this is a completely failed state. Sadly. The government cannot stand on its own. It needs the support of the African Union, the Ethiopian troops particularly, and the American financial assistance. What led to the 1991 state collapse partly was what happened with this President Siad Barre. Siad Barre was a military general who came to power in Somalia, and he had this vision, which he inherited from the different youth groups that were formed by the British as they were leaving Somalia. And this was the Greater Somalia Project. Okay. They said, like, we need to have to create this Greater Somalia that includes this entire region where the Somali people live. However, the problem is this place has already become a country, and that country is called Ethiopia. There is a clear border. When Somalia was carved out of the rest of the Horn of Africa by the Italians, it resulted in this border. So you cannot simply go into somebody's own border, as you know, there will be a problem. And 1974, the Ethiopian government was changed. Emperor Haile Selassie was dethroned, and 1977, the Somali army invaded Ethiopia. Okay, but the Ethiopian government at that time was the military junta, as I told you. The military junta labeled itself as a communist regime. And at that time, as you know, the world was in two camps. The Cold War, right? The socialist camp and the capitalist camp. The Westerners and the Easterners, as it is somehow coming back again these days. So the Ethiopian government said, well, we are socialists. Why did they say that? The military junta, why did they say that? They were not into socialism, to be honest with you. When the Somali government invaded Ethiopia, the military junta needed weapons. Emperor Haile Selassie already had paid to the American government for some weapons. But the American government refused to give those weapons. There's going to be war, and we don't want the war there. There's a lot of details I'm skipping. And then when any kind of negotiation with the Americans was not working on, the Ethiopian government said, okay, you are not giving us weapons, you are not giving us diplomatic support, yeah, okay. We are going to the Russians, and the Russians and the Chinese and the Cubans say, yeah, we'll support you. Well, let's kick out these Americans anyways from this region. And Cuban soldiers, Russian military experts flocked to Ethiopia to support the Ethiopian army, and the military junta mobilized a huge militia, and they were able to kick out the Somalian army very quickly. And you go to Ethiopia today, there is a square called the Ethio-Cuba Friendship Square, where Ethiopia and Cuba every year come together to celebrate their friendship because of what happened during the Somali invasion. Ziad Barre, after this defeat, it was a brutal defeat. Okay, I had zillions of videos I can show you, but we don't have time. After this defeat, he was not really doing well. His acceptance among the populace, the Somali populace, was very low, particularly up here, which was already a different entity on its own as a political economy, as you. So, in order to subjugate these people, Ziad Barre did a lot of nasty things to the people over here. And that led to civil war. In 1991, Somalia collapsed, and it still hasn't gotten its strength back. Yes, to everyone else, but particularly to the people in Somaliland. There really was very, very gruesome atrocities that happened there. And then that led to the Ethiopian army intervening in 2011, in 2001. There is a lot of mess after that. And we can't cover everything. So in the question of Somalia today, there are a lot of players, a lot of factors that you have to take in, lots of variables. There's clanism or tribalism, even though Somali people are one people. There's lots of clans, and the clans, they have their own history of fighting against each other and cooperating with one another. So that comes into the Somali politics. There is also this very tension-filled relation of some of the ruling class in Somalia with the Ethiopian ruling class. There is also the Eritrean government that wants to have a greater leverage in the region. There are the Egyptians. There's lots of variables. And the Turks and the Saudis and the UAEs and everybody else. So the question of Somaliland today, Somaliland, is it a country? It has its own passport. Is it a country? We can't say. Why? They claim they are a country. They have their own currency. They have their own passport, but they are not recognized. Okay, so it creates a problem and another geopolitical tension. Okay, so what are the burning HOA issues, Horn of African issues today? Ethiopia's quest for sea access today. This is a burning issue. Unless it gets resolved, there will be a problem. There will be a problem because that population is expanding and they need sea access, and somehow there needs to be a deal. Renewed national assertiveness, heightened geopolitical sensitivity, and disrupting militarized tribalism is still in that country. Egypt's anxiety. Egyptians are still in their old paradigm. We need to ascertain our dominance on the Red Sea and the Nile. So there is a lot of testosterone there. The GERD loss, they haven't come into terms with that. The Egyptians still are struggling, like, they built this great Renaissance dam again and stuff. What are we going to do about it? Apparently you can't, because now 74 trillion liters of water. If you do anything to the dam, it's going to come at you. It's going to destroy you into the Mediterranean. Another is the recent loss of Western Sudan, because Sudan, even though it was a country, it was highly influenced by Egypt. It was an Egyptian turf. Actually, some people say like, it's the turf for the Ethiopian and the Egyptian spies to fight against one another. So now Western Sudan is lost for Egypt, at least. It doesn't have any influence over that because of the RSF's control. Another very interesting and very dangerous thing that we have to think about is the fragmentation of Sudan. Sudan is not, it's in a very dangerous spot in history. Eritrea, militarization and demographic hemorrhaging. It's highly militarized country, national services demanded, and the youth are fleeing the country, and the economy is almost non-existent. Okay, so these are the problems. And Djibouti, security through rent-seeking. This is the paradigm that the Djiboutians are doing. So this also has invited all these military powers from the world into that one little spot. So if anything happens outside, like somewhere else in the world, there will be conflict in the Horn. If there is a conflict in the Horn, the whole economy of the Horn is going to be disrupted, which is going to be a suffering for the people. So another concern. Okay. So, and today, whether we like it or not, there seems to be this thing that we are seeing in the world, the multipolar order, which really is not an order, which is chaos. It is chaos. So when that happens, there will be a lot of jostling for powers by the great military and economic powers, and that will definitely take a lot of navigation and diplomatic acumen by the smaller countries, so that they don't ally themselves with any of the parties and state negotiate their own interests to the best of their interest. So think like an HOA expert now. Take these questions, please, and reflect. Write your. I have put 5 questions. You can take 3 and write down your answers and take a picture and send it to Professor Kashmir.
You guys have pieces of paper. You can pick one question. Tell me what you think.
Okay.
Short on time.
Okay.
These
Yeah.
are great questions.
Thank you.
In fact, one of these questions may turn up on the quiz, so. Once you have an answer that you're satisfied with to your one question, you can drop off your paper on the podium. And I will see you Monday for Israel and Palestine.
Fingers crossed, very interesting. Might sneak.
You're welcome to come. Yeah. I'll do my best to unpack it. Historical perspectives.
I would love to learn more about it. I know Israelis asked the rights to have an Israel, a Jewish state within the Ethiopian and the Beit as in Eastern Ethiopia, in the Golden Council.
I know that they tried a number of different places in Africa. They also tried Kenya, they tried Uganda, they tried the United States.
The request about the request they sent to Environment, what they interested and what why it was rejected was like they wanted everybody in the place should be evicted, like the native people living there. They said, yeah, he's evicted all of them in this lands, like this forest. And I said, how about not doing that? Yeah, it's very true that I have some months ago we found the whole document. It's called the Harar Council. It's like there's a those confidential document that now they have declassified on the plan on the like, exchange of letters between the emperor and the Ethiopian and the same as court and then it was very interesting, very
Very interesting. What language is it in?
English.
Mine.
Yes, I'll share. Yes. Actually, I think I can do that right now.